Hello and welcome back to the Nimblelink Nerd Lair. I am your host, Brandon Hart, and with me today is somebody very special to us here in the Nimblelink family. It is our CTO, co-founder, and head engineer, Kurt Larson. Kurt?
Hello.
Very good. Well done. So I wanted to bring Kurt on because we wanted to kind of dive a little bit deeper into this whole idea of CAT M1, this very exciting technology. If you haven't seen the episode already, we just did an episode, I think it's episode 10 or something like that, about kind of what M1 is, an introduction to M1, and the fact that M1 is real, and a little bit of an exploration on power save mode and extended ERX. So you can find that video right up here. You can click here and watch that if you haven't already. So we're just kind of going to build on that conversation a little bit. And so I wanted to bring Kurt in to get his perspective, being somebody who develops devices, being somebody who is co-founder of an Internet of Things hardware company. You've got some insight kind of into what maybe some of the people in the audience, the developers, the engineers, might be thinking or might want to take advantage of. So first, just to kind of kick it all off, what is your explanation in your own words of what LTE CAT M1 is?
Well, I like to start with kind of the two promises of M1. It's the low power promise and the low cost promise.
Yeah.
That's what people wish they had with cellular technologies, and that is what is promised and coming with the M1 technology.
Okay. Low cost and low power. How is it low power?
Sure. So in your previous videos, you've talked about PSM and EDRX, which are two of the features. Cliff notes on those: power save mode, PSM, allows you to turn off the modem and reduce the amount of time between when the modem is connecting to the cellular network.
So a lot of people in the current devices will just turn the modem off or power it down or put it into a sleep mode. Isn't that basically the same thing as what low power gives you with power save mode?
It's a little different. You can actually leave the radio up and running. So the operating system in the radio is up and running, but the radio is disconnecting from the network and does not return to the network for an extended period of time. During that time, you're in very low power state. The other thing is when the modem comes back online, the time to search for towers and reconnect is significantly reduced. So the total on-air time for transmit and receive is significantly reduced compared to a traditional any cellular technology.
So if they were using one of the other technologies, say any of these, with these, basically the idea would be when you're not using the radio, you turn it off or power it down or even put it into a sleep state. But
Correct.
The radio itself is still, if it's in sleep state, is still kind of doing a lot of background stuff, checking in with the network. Or if you turn it off, then it has to go through an entire boot cycle, use
Right.
up a lot of power to do that kind of thing, takes a long time before
Correct.
it can actually send data.
So in a lot of the applications where power is important, which is where we think M1 is really targeted and going to end up in, traditionally the way people have achieved low power is to turn the modem off. So it has its own processor inside of it, it has its own radios, so not only do you disconnect from the network and shut down the radios, they shut the processing unit inside the module off, and you get to like a zero power consumption. The penalty is when you turn the modem back on, there's a boot time for the operating system inside of the modem.
Yeah.
And then there's also a network search time. When the radios come on, it has to go search and find the available towers and negotiate a connection with a specific tower before you can do anything useful with the modem. And that's on the order of 15 to 30 seconds, depending on the cellular technology, from power on to actual network registration. With CAT M1 and the PSM mode, you can put the device in a very low power mode and then get back onto the network extremely fast. So you don't have to spend the boot up time, and you also don't have to spend the network search time. looking
Gotcha.
for towers.
Gotcha.
So that's PSM.
Cool. The other one, EDRX.
EDRX. So I think in your previous video you talked about how a traditional LTE device basically pages out to the network about once every second, a little over a second. And DRX, the changes with the GPP release 13 allow that to extend from, instead of checking in once every second, you check in a little bit over once every 10 seconds.
Right.
Which allows you to reduce the amount of times that you're turning the radio system on.
Yep.
And when the radio is on, that is the high power state of the modem, so you want to minimize that. So with the CAT M technology promises, that has been increased the time window between those from 1 second to 10 seconds. And the extended...
that's DRX, that's discontinuous receive, that's
discontinuous
DRX.
receive. And then the extended discontinuous receive allows you to skip up to 240 HF hyperframes.
Yeah, the 10.24 seconds. Yeah.
So when you figure all that out, it comes out to basically you don't have to send these paging requests up to every 40 minutes, basically, between the negotiation with your device and the tower.
Yeah. So from 1.28 seconds to 10.24 seconds to 40 minutes.
40 minutes.
Is a massive difference.
Yes, and so this is important for people that want to be able to send a message from the network down to their device to kind of wake it up. Some people, when they developed their products, they would use like an SMS message to like wake their product up.
Shoulder tap.
A shoulder tap is what you'd call that. And in the older technologies, your cell modem had to be online and paging once every second, which takes up a lot of power to have that continuous connection. In the extended DRX case, now you can be online and not have to check in with the tower for up to 40 minutes, which is just a huge time saving.
So power save mode is really kind of optimally used for when you have a device with a Skywire modem in it, of course, that is basically always going to be the one that initiates the connection. So it's going to wake up, it's going to connect to the network, it's going to send data, go back to sleep again. It listens for just a little bit of time after it sends that data, but there's no way to really reach it while it's in that power save mode.
Correct.
Extended DRX, the reason you would choose that if you're developing a device instead of power save mode is if you want to be able to initiate a connection into that device. So the device doesn't always have to start that connection, right?
That's correct.
Because it'll actually listen at 40-minute intervals.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So both of those features become critically important, again, kind of depending upon which way your connection will be initiated.
Correct.
Awesome.
And it's important to understand that, at least for those two features specifically, there is both device-side dependencies as well as network-side dependencies. And right now, it's 2017, and as the M1 networks come on from the different carriers, their rollout of those individual feature sets on the network side are scaled out over time. So there will be some initial feature sets that may or may not include PSM and EDRX at the initial network launch point, but there's roadmaps for when some of those extended features will be available later this year. Some other things to point out beyond the two that you've covered in detail in the previous episodes.
There's more to it.
Yes.
Those are the highlight, the headliner features, but there's more to it.
Yeah, there's a lot of things buried in the spec in the protocol support.
We should also point out too that PSM and EDRX are not specific features to M1. They are just being released simultaneously with and sort of paired with the release of M1.
Right.
So there may actually be some backward functionality for those two features with some older network technologies or previous versions of LTE.
It's possible. It also would mean you need a commitment from the module provider to support that in their firmware.
Right.
Even if the network has it, doesn't mean the module supplier actually would include that.
Back to your previous point where this can say, hey, I'm going into PSM. If the network says, I don't know what that is,
it's tough.
That's, you're not going to get it. Yeah, cool. All right, so you were saying.
So one of the other promise around low power, the spec allows for another power class for this technology type. So instead of transmitting at 23 dBm, you can actually transmit at 20 dBm, which actually results in the highest power savings, because when you're trying to crank out your transmit packets, that's when you're consuming the most power in the system. And by lowering the transmit power, or the peak transmit power, again, you're lowering the total power under the curve, and you get massive power savings every time you're transmitting anything, whether it's paging packets or actual data packets for your PPP connections, whatever it might be. So that's one thing.
That'll affect your range, though, will it not?
No. So there's other features that have been included, the different messaging modes. And so the extended coverage mode A, for example, is one of the things that's being pushed out to the networks and the devices. And what that involves is, in order to extend coverage in a traditional LTE network, the actual RF packets are repeated. So the tower will send the packet 6 times. I don't know exactly what the numbers. It might be actually 8 times, but the device on the CAT M side has the ability to, as soon as it has seen the packet enough times to actually validly decode that packet, it can stop receiving that packet. And so it doesn't have to listen to all 6 of them and then build up its answer. As soon as it gets enough data to see what it needs to see and translate that data, it does that. So what that means is further reduced on-air time, which again, that's what we're trying to minimize.
Right.
So with the higher transmit power and the repeated packets, that's like maximum worst case scenario for power consumption. And by lowering the maximum transmit power, or reducing the number of packets you actually have to listen to, you significantly reduce the total time on air and total power consumption.
Wow. Okay.
Your question was about coverage. So the reason they send the packets 6 to 8 times for every single transmission on a traditional LTE network is to help with the signal propagation into hard to reach areas. And so on the CAT M1 side, by going to a lower power consumption and lower repetition rate, you get the lower power consumption if you're close to towers, but you still have the repetitions if you're farther away from the towers. So you can still get that propagation enhancement.
Yeah, I see. Okay. Interesting. So in this case, you're actually getting both the benefit of having a lower power radio system, using less power because you're transmitting for a shorter period of time, potentially.
Yep. And
also still getting the range or possibly even better range because of the way that this is set up.
Yep. So there, with all the enhancements to the standards, there is I think it's a 16 dB link budget improvement, which equates to potentially being able to communicate 62 miles away from a tower.
62 miles.
Yes, that's what you can see in some of the...
Now, to be clear, that is in theory, yes?
Yeah, that's the theoretical physical maximums that you can read about.
So don't expect to be able to go out there, deploy your device 62 miles from the nearest cell tower and have everything work perfectly. Most likely not going to happen.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
But you can get packets that far.
Yeah. Okay. Good. So, yeah, just wanted to be clear on that part.
So those are a handful of the methods. There's still some other kind of smaller changes to the CAT M1 technology that allows you to further reduce the power.
Any notable?
None that are easy to explain.
Even with a whiteboard?
No. Sorry.
Okay. All right. So we can maybe post a link to the information on the YouTube video below it or something like that.
Can I do one of those things where it's like right here? You
can. Yeah, actually the person who gets to put all that in is right behind the camera, so feel free to do as much as you want of that. So all the technology, the features, the description of how those things work are super helpful and great. But in reality, when somebody goes to actually design a device and design a system, a solution that will use M1, what are the best types of use cases for M1? Because we talk about this as being so amazing and so awesome and all, the best option for everybody. But we've got all these other technologies and the other cellular networks are still staying on. There must be a reason for that. Why would everybody not just go to this? What's this good for as compared to the other ones?
So to kind of take a higher level view of what's happening in the LTE network space, there's been this bifurcation in the strategy for supporting different technologies. Specifically, consumers that have LTE-based cell phones and network equipment, they want the fastest connections possible. And so we've seen the expansion of the LTE categories to support starting at Cat 3, going to Cat 4, going to Cat 6 and beyond, which is, as you move up those numbers, you move up the bandwidth path. You also move up the power path, and you move up in price as you move up that direction. As you look towards applications that want to get to lower cost points and lower power points, you have technology kind of going in a direction that, from a category perspective, it's going to the Category 1, Category M, Category NB-IoT. And as you move down that path, you lower the power consumption, you reduce the complexity of the information that's being transmitted. So the processing inside of these devices is lower end microcontrollers that can support lower power ranges and lower cost points.
Mm-hmm.
You also have less complex RF transceivers in these devices. So again, you can get to lower cost and lower power consumption on the RF front ends. And then also on the filtering side, you can reduce the entire RF signal chain to further reduce the cost and the complexity of these products. And so as you move down to the right,
mm-hmm.
You're moving to further and further lower cost, further and further lower power, further and further lower complexity. Another one of the huge benefits of the CAT M1 is the ability, specifically affecting the cost, is the reduction to only require a single antenna on the LTE network. Antennas can be $1 to $20 depending on the type of product you're using, and to only have to buy one of those is a significant cost savings.
Not to mention
system.
Space. I mean, if you've got two LTE
size.
antennas,
Yep.
they have to be 5 inches or so apart from each other. You're not going to get a small wearable device that's got those kind of antennas in it. So yeah, having a single antenna, half duplex communication is greatly advantageous down this path. In terms of what a device they would be building is, if I'm building a mobile LTE router to serve up Wi-Fi on a bus, M1's good for that, yeah?
No, sorry.
All my dreams are ruined.
Yes, if you want to create a Wi-Fi access point, I would steer you towards the up path in the bandwidth, because you would probably like to have multiple users on your Wi-Fi network.
Right.
And as they're streaming videos and
mm-hmm.
updating Facebook and such,
watching from the workshop on YouTube,
very important part of their day, I'm sure. They want low latency and they want high bandwidth to move that data faster,
right.
Especially when they're only on the bus for 10 minutes every day. So the higher categories are appropriate for higher speed, lower latency.
Okay. So what if I am building the world's next great tank monitoring solution?
Army tanks?
Army tanks?
What kind of tanks?
Okay, fair question. Diesel tanks out on a farm.
Okay. Then I would recommend, what is the lowest cost thing you can buy to attach to that tank that can
mm-hmm.
get your information out. So usually when people are monitoring tanks, they're monitoring some sort of bin that has a liquid or solid in it.
Yep.
And the bin level may not change very frequently. It might
right.
might only change once a day, or maybe it might be changing all day long. Independent of that, the amount of information that you're sending over the network is very small.
Mm-hmm.
So I would recommend the lowest cost technology that can support that very small amount of data, which would steer me towards some of the lower category LTE technologies.
Right.
Specifically M1.
M1, there we go. That's the answer.
M1, narrowband IoT, those are the types of things that would get you to the cost point that is most beneficial.
Sure.
It would also enable very long battery lives for some types of tanks. We've seen a lot of companies deploying tank monitoring solutions that the tanks are in remote regions and they don't have access to permanent power. And so battery-powered cellular systems are already real today, but the battery packs are large and expensive to be able to support the use cases of remote cellular in the older technologies. The benefit of CAT M by lowering the power in this case also reduces the total cost of the entire battery system, which is further lowers the cost of the solution for the end users.
Awesome. Which is what we want
Yes.
in those cases. Beautiful. Okay. Any last tips that developers who are wanting to incorporate M1 technologies into their devices need to know or be aware of that makes it unique and special and a different situation than other cellular technologies?
I think it's important to point out that the fact that it's lower power does not mean that the instantaneous current has changed at all in the system.
Right.
So if you compare CAT M1 radios to like a Bluetooth low energy radio, the CAT M1 radio is still going to be 100 times more powerful in the instance when it's transmitting and the radios are on.
But CAT M1 is so low power. So if I'm streaming video and it's, VGA quality video, so it's very, very, low res. I don't need big pipe. But I want to run my thing off of a battery. M1 is still going to help me instead of the other ones, right? It's lower power.
The total radio on time is what is going to dictate your power. And if you're streaming video, your radio is going to be on all the time.
Yeah.
And it's not going to be a good fit.
So you're saying that this will be just as power intensive, or at least in the same range as any other LTE radio?
It will be a percentage lower, so
Yeah.
maybe 10 or 20% lower than a Category 1 technology, but it's not going to be on the par of Bluetooth low energy or some of the extremely low power local area network radios.
Yeah. So its low power advantages are when you are not using it or it's on standby or in idle mode.
Correct.
Yeah.
And when you are communicating to the tower, the total power overhead is significantly reduced by some of the way the signaling has changed.
Yeah, because it can shorten the transmission time.
So instead of being on for 10 seconds while you transmit your tank level value, you can be on for 10 microseconds.
Right. Cool. Awesome.
Power
Anything else?
under the curve is what has been reduced.
Sure. Anything else you want them to know? That's a good point to point out. So I just want to give you time if there's anything
shocker.
else like
I think
that.
that everybody, they're like, wait a second, this looks just like the power consumption from a previous radio. And,
Yeah.
And yes, the instantaneous current is about the same. The total time the radio on though is significantly reduced, which is where you get all the power savings.
Yeah. Yeah. We've had multiple conversations like that.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool.
Low cost, low bandwidth, low power.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for walking us through all of that.
No problem.
Very much appreciated. See, this is why I had him on. So, also, I should also thank you for allowing us to have this set in the nerd lair. This is really
Yes.
more your room than it is mine. So, that is appreciated. But
Just don't touch anything.
don't touch it. Don't walk around, rub my feet on the floor, and start poking at stuff.
This is a static safe room.
Okay.
Just kidding. This one is not.
Yeah, I got proximity to static bags in here, I'm sure. So, again, thank you very much for coming onto the show, for letting us use this room. Until next time, this has been From the Workshop. Please leave us some comments. Give us a thumbs up if you liked it. Subscribe to the channel. I think it's just the Nimble Link channel, and you'll get all the From the Workshop videos. And until then, have fun developing and have fun with Cat M1. It's going to be awesome. Thank you. Bye.